highlights or like, oh, thanks, Erin. Any highlights or big network aha moments or things that happen in the breakout rooms that folks want to share with the rest of the group? All right, no pressure. Cool. Well, glad you made some good connections. That's the probably main goal of these calls. So thank you all for joining us and for hopping in those breakout rooms. I'm going to facilitate our panel conversation today, and we're going to be talking about Food Hub networking and sort of why it's important, what some of the challenges are, and create some opportunities for folks doing that work to share how they define success. Oh, thanks, Elliot. And also hopefully create some opportunities for them to connect with each other as well. And for those of you that are committed value chain coordination community of practice attendees, you might remember that we actually had a Food Hub networking call in October or November of 2021 with a different group of panelists than the folks we're going to hear from today. And then our friend Katelyn Porter, who manages the New Hampshire Food Hub network, came to me in maybe December and said, hey, I'm running this Food Hub network. I'm looking for friends and people that are in a similar position to connect with. What should we do? And we decided that this conversation would be a great place both to just learn a little bit more about what's going on in the Food Hub networking world, and also hopefully give Katelyn access to some new friends who she can connect with and learn from. So if that's you, if you're involved in a Food Hub network, if you're thinking about starting one, either send me an email, send Katelyn an email, or keep the discussion going in the Food Systems Leadership Network discussion group. That's another great place to connect with folks that are doing value chain coordination work and might have some shared challenges or successes that they would want to share. Okay, Erin, could you actually pin our speakers who are Katelyn, Will, Hugo, and Jesse so that we can see everybody? So I'm excited about this conversation because we constructed a little panel that has folks that are interacting with Food Hub networks in different ways and sort of have different perspectives on that work. We'll be hearing from Katelyn, who manages a statewide network, from Will Gray, who manages a large regional network that stretches all along the East Coast, and then Hugo and Jesse, who are hubs that participate in networks but have kind of different food hubbing models. So it's going to be sort of a multi-level look at what this strategy is and how it works and some of the ways that folks are approaching it and the values that can be found there. So I have a few questions that I shared with the panelists, and we have a good long chunk to hear from them, but I encourage you all to shoot your questions into the chat as they occur to you, and we'll kind of keep an eye on that. And then there's going to be, I think, about 15 minutes, 20 minutes at the end of the call for audience questions as well. So we hope this is participatory, and also hope that you all get a lot out of this conversation today. All right, I see Jesse, I see Hugo. Do I know how to pin people? Pin Will. Oh, let's see. Pin. Can you do multiple pins? Add pin. Jesse. This is me learning Zoom while you all are on this call.
Spotlight for everyone. Does that?
Oh, is that different? No, I think this works. Does that work?
Pin.
Should I pin myself too? Ouch. All right. Okay. I think everybody's pinned. Cool. Does that look normal to other people? Can you see 5 squares?
I just see everybody still.
Really? I see everybody pinned. All right.
I'll spotlight everyone.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's great. Thanks, Erin. Sorry, guys.
Part of running networks is working through a lot of Zoom tech.
Learning stupid Zoom challenges. All right. Well, with that behind us, I'm going to ask each of our speakers today to introduce themselves and just talk a little bit about the organization that they're representing today. And since Katelyn is kind of our guest of honor, why don't you start, Katelyn?
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. And I love going into this with the knowing that I'm looking for Food Hub network friends. So like Ellie said, if you're managing a Food Hub network, we obviously know this work is very dynamic and challenging and just always looking for answers, obviously. and really camaraderie and learning from each other. So always just curious what else is happening out there around the country. I certainly don't have the answers, and just hoping that together, leaning into that collective wisdom, that we can learn from each other. So anyways, with that, I'm Katelyn Porter with the New Hampshire Food Hub Network, which is based out of the New Hampshire Food Alliance, which is a very small nonprofit organization. There's 3 of us that make up the team. It's a team that's based out of the University of New Hampshire. So that is who backs us. And my role is specifically the New Hampshire Food Hub Network coordinator. And our Food Hub Network aims to learn best practices from each other, create, really my job, I kind of think of my role as almost a food hub social worker, essentially thinking of resources that food hubs need, and directing those resources towards them. And if they don't exist, creating them and then directing them towards them. Long term, midterm too, we are hoping to actively shift from more of a, community of practice essentially to an active transactional food hub network that shifts our attention more towards institutional relationships. And I guess I'll just pass it on to Will.
Thanks, Katelyn. This is Will Gray. I'm in Richmond, Virginia, and I manage the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative. And we are a multi-regional network spanning right now about central Maine to Charleston, South Carolina, about 1,000 miles as the crow flies, and connecting 12 active trading Food Hub members, and maybe 8 to 10 sort of non-transactional supporting organizations, many of whom also bring their own local or regional networks. So we're very interested. It is not like sort of not seeking to offset or replace local sourcing or local sales, not even really trying to offset the regional relationships in place, but very much to the tune of what Katelyn was talking about. We are working with folks that already have the sort of community of practice and peer-led wisdom-based networks in place. And we're trying to see if we can layer on some transactional opportunity with a particular focus on increasing product availability outside of maybe the narrow seasonality of a single place and time, and meeting unmet customer demand and creating new opportunities for each participant's local suppliers. Let me send it to Hugo.
Thank you. My name is Hugo Mogollon. I am the director at Fresh Farm. We are an organization based in Washington, D.C. As like many of you, we work to create a more equitable, sustainable, resilient food system here in the Mid-Atlantic. And we work creating food access, some economic development, and like working with communities through like 3 main programs. We do hands-on education, nutrition education with schools, with farmers markets, and also we do food distribution through our food hub. And we are a member of the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative. As Will was mentioning, we have like our own network with our farmers, but we are like a non-traditional food hub. We have created this operation that uses farmers markets as the natural points of food aggregation, and then we run these operations at the market. So we are low infrastructure, decentralized distribution. And we focus mainly on institutions that would like to incorporate local food in their programming, and they have difficulties making it happen. So they don't know where to go instead of going to Costco, where to get the local food, or they need more like assistance on how to develop the program to incorporate it. It is just like a wholesale operation or like a, shares operation. And also because normally some of the institutions would be out of the normal operation of the food hub because they wouldn't reach a minimum order. We are able to take those clients because we are already in the city and we basically do this last mile operation. So it's been successful. We're working currently with more than 80 institutions and working with 36 farmers so far. And as you know, it's important for us to be part of this network because we try to understand what are the struggles of food hubs, and that also help us to think how to de-risk and take advantage of the connections there. And I'm going to pass it to Jesse.
Thanks, Hugo. My name is Jesse Leadbetter. I'm with Fresh List here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We accidentally started a food hub back in 2014. I was looking for a way to get out of the corporate world that I was in and into something more meaningful. And we decided we were going to build a food technology company to build a magical technology to fix local food systems. I spent a couple of years doing that. It turns out it's a lot harder than technology can fix. But I'd become too close to so many farmers that I'd gotten to know along the way, and decided just going to buy a van and rent some cold storage out of a brewery and see what happened. So flash forward to today, we have got a team of 9, including myself. We have about 75 small family farms here in North and South Carolina that we work directly with, and then probably another 100 or so that we help distribute with through our food hub networks. We're part of the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative, part of that, the southern branch of that, and then also part of the South Carolina Food Hub Network, which is a network of about 5 active hubs. And it's interesting seeing the difference in the 2 different networks and how they operate, and the value that everyone gets out of them. But one of the things we're trying to do is kind of return a little bit to our technology roots and use the experience that we have as a food hub operator to build some tools to support other food hubs and local and regional food systems. It's something we've always felt, that while technology can't replace a lot of things in this world that we're in, I do think there are certain applications that can make it a lot easier for all of us to operate. So I'm excited to be able to do more of that.
Awesome. Jesse, I didn't know about your connection to the South Carolina network, so I might tap you to talk a little bit about that, the differences there. Cool. Great. So this question is a little bit more oriented towards Will and Katelyn, but Hugo and Jesse, I'd love if you have comments too. So you both talked a little bit about what the networks you're a part of are hoping to accomplish, but I'm wondering, what would success look like both for the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative and the New Hampshire Food Hub Network? Whoever feels excited can jump in. All right, Katelyn.
All right.
Too polite.
All right, so what are we trying to accomplish? What does success look like? I was in a meeting last week with Cullen from Farm Fair, which I know probably some people on this call are connected with her and her work. And she put it in a way that I really related to, and I want to share it with this group, is that there's often 3 phases of a food hub network. Phase 1 is kind of best practice sharing, like I shared in my intro. Phase 2, more of one-off trading. Trading is starting to happen among food hubs, but it's usually like one-to-one relationships. And then phase 3 is the all-encompassing seamless transactional network, where things have kind of taken a life of their own. And food hubs have the resources they need to be trading. Somehow financially, it all makes sense. And so I think, it's the vision, long-term vision. I think part of our vision is very much seeing New Hampshire as part of a New England food hub region, and really figuring out how we fit into that scene best. But I think, the pinnacle of success for us looks like food hubs are less reactive and more planning oriented. So they're, working with their farmers, their crop planning, and then creating those institutional connections so that the farmer can feel like they're putting seeds in the ground of a sold product. And same for the institutions on that side. You're creating a system where they know that they can rely on a local product. Technology is the big one. I'm sure it'll be brought up with all of us. That, is there technology outlets that we can use that accurately, show supply and demand on some sort of live, interactive way? Is yet to be seen by me, but I'm open to people's thoughts and ideas there. And then just cross-docking, fuller trucks on the road and where Food Hub's resources are being maximized. So that's our gold star standard.
Wow, that's a great answer. And Katelyn spoke to, in answering, spoke to so many of the operational challenges that I think I'll take the easy part and just do the dream, the vision, which is, I think for us, it is that we can help demonstrate a fully alternative way of moving resilient and sustainable food around to everyone, not just bound by political boundary, not bound by geographic barrier, but something that is, whatever the word you want to use, scalable, competitive. Maybe those words aren't even relevant to what we're ultimately talking about, but something that is that points at a fuller solution than what all of the brilliant people participating and bringing their own goals and their own vision. That points to something larger than any of these folks have been able to work out on their own, or even in their local areas, or even in their regional areas. Something that will take a huge amount of collective action and collaboration and transparency to challenge the massive institutionalized and systemic barriers that we're up against.
Thank you guys. I think both, Katelyn's sort of more operational tactical vision and then Will's sort of bigger picture vision superimposed are really exciting and somewhere I want to live. So for Hugo and Jesse, seeing that sort of larger scale vision for your individual organizations or businesses, I'm not sure what your tax status is. How does that vision contribute to the vision of your organization? What's the value proposition for you for participating in a Food Hub network, both either Jesse from your perspective participating into and Hugo for yours in the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative?
Yeah, from my experience, I'll kind of echo the progression. Initially it was just resource sharing, and maybe even a little before that, some of the just therapy, as I mentioned, just being around, getting to engage with people who are doing similar work, because this work is incredibly difficult without a pandemic. So just having that, that community of like-minded people to bounce ideas off of, and whether it's just, hey, does anyone have an HR handbook I can borrow, or how are you pricing stuff for corporate wellness programs, whatever it may be. I think the trading part of it is something that we've talked about this with the Eastern Food Hub Collab, and that you can't really force the transactions. Even if Will was a sales guy and his only job just going from hub to hub and trying to promote what the other hubs have, we all have, I think those things just, they have to happen naturally, organically. And there's certain limitations, I think, economically, where you can only have so many hubs involved in a transaction before, it just doesn't make sense. And so for us, I tend to take more of the operational side, like the things that we are getting out of the networks that we're a part of, in addition to all the great resources and just having, places to bounce ideas off of, is really starting to see that opportunity when you can have the expanded seasonality and these shoulder seasons and take advantage of just the difference in regionality that we have here in the Carolinas and beyond. We haven't really traded with anyone further north than 4P Foods, which is kind of just outside of DC. But we have asparagus, 3 to 4 weeks before they have it, and we can make that trip work and kind of work out the logistics and the pricing and all of that. So, and then obviously, like I said, the technology aspect is still something that, as I got to work with a lot of the hubs and kind of see what technology they're using, and it is so true that every hub is just so different. It's both what they're doing and how they're doing it, and it's great. I think we need that in the ecosystem overall, but definitely interested in getting more involved in that side.
Yeah, well, for us, I think it's like basically what people are looking here. It is like that collective knowledge is very important, especially because we all are working somehow with organizations with certain limitations, and I think just learning from others help you to maybe see that those barriers are more common than you think, or how others have overcome those barriers. And being part of the collaborative is really incredible, because being these like different kind of food hub is important for us to learn what kind of solutions you or other food hubs have for the problems that we face. And sometimes those solutions are solved by having a warehouse, for example, but how we can learn from that to create an alternative. I think that is key. So that collective knowledge is important, but also you're trying to find ways for these like transactional value that would bring other hubs to our operations. Right now that our demand has grown, so how we can extend the season. I think that's something that we are looking for. But also we believe that we could be a good partner to do like hub to hub sales. I don't know, when food hubs are coming to the city, we're expecting that it would leave the city with produce, since we are able to fulfill those orders. So trying to explore that financial opportunity for our farmers is another important aspect of that network. Yeah.
Awesome. So it sounds like there's both the, physical trading that really has a lot of value. And I'm actually a 4P customer. So Jesse, I might have eaten the asparagus from y'all at some point. And then also, just that collaboration, connectivity, problem solving, sharing of tools. So on that note, it feels like technology is kind of a hot topic. So I'm wondering if you all could talk about the technology that you are using now to coordinate and collaborate between hubs, and what gaps still exist in terms of, tech needs. And Jesse, it sounds like that's kind of a particular area of interest for you. So do you want to kick this off?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the network, currently, communication wise, it's really, we have a dedicated Slack channel. There's not a ton of conversation ongoing, but that's a great spot if someone just has something they want to share with the network. People can kind of consume it as needed. Other than that, I mean, really, let's just kind of email directly with whatever hub because we don't broadcast our availability across the entire network, because one, you wouldn't be able to put pricing on there necessarily to the end consumer or the end hub consumer if it's got to go through 2 or 3 different hubs. And so a lot of the communication is just hub to hub based on, okay, we figured out the logistical piece. If you have product that I need, I know I can get it. And in the best scenarios, when you actually have a route that exists, like Grow Food from Charleston, South Carolina, comes to Charlotte every Monday. So once that established channel is there, it's really just kind of sharing week to week our availability. We have some internal systems that we've built, super simple. Like none of this is like really, really fancy. Just kind of like a step beyond spreadsheet, moving more towards some of the like no code. There's a platform called Airtable that looks a lot like a spreadsheet, but it's actually a relational database. And it just kind of forces the data that we're putting into this system to be standardized. In both networks that we're a part of, there's always the request for data so that they can kind of aggregate across the network and share that. And I know that has to be painful because everybody's data, we all, whether it's the units we sell in or whether it's purple Cherokee tomatoes or Cherokee purple, like there's so much like normalization that has to be done within just a hub itself, much less across a network. And so I think, for us, the tools that with the Regional Food Systems Partnership grant that Local Food Hub got back in 2021, our role is kind of building out, I think the technical term was a crop, integrated crop calendar. But really it's just kind of a database that we're trying to create that shows, when each hub's network of farmers is going to have different products, and knowing that that's not an exact science, but at least giving it a visible element to where you can actually see when those shoulder seasons exist. Because again, trying to decipher everyone's availability lists and know what's coming down the pipeline is very difficult. So I think, Katelyn, you might have said it, but really the kind of solving for the supply and demand piece is, I think, the biggest opportunity, not just with the networks, but with food hubs in general. If we primarily serve restaurants. We have about 450 chefs, brewers, bakers, like all small, independently owned here in Charlotte, and they can write a menu to where it's flexible enough to use with whatever's in season, or they can print those menus every week. But to move, into those bigger markets and kind of into the mainstream, I think you have to provide more visibility to it. And that's kind of what we're hoping to do on the technology side.
Other tech comments? I know, Katelyn, this was an area that you were kind of curious about, or Hugo, Will, feel free.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, really, just gleaning information about technology that's out there. I know when the New Hampshire Food Hub Network first started, there was a Slack channel, but it not much life was breathed into it over the years, and it kind of faded out. And we've got a couple food hubs that are very Slack oriented and are very gung-ho about kind of revitalizing it, and the majority of our food hubs, I think, kind of view it as like just another thing that they have to log into. So it's tough to kind of bridge that gap and bring people together through another technology outlet.
Yeah.
One piece of technology, in a way, that we have been using and developing is working in close partnership with someone through UNH Cooperative Extension has helped me develop a somewhat of an interactive map using ArcGIS, really to start to display distribution routes so that connections can be formed among our food hubs. And it's a little clunky, not perfect solution, but really at the end of the day, our goal was, how do we create conversations that can then happen offline? How do we create a situation where enough data is shared, people feel like it is, vague enough where they're not giving away all their contact lists or anything? So we broke it down by zip code, actually, and any zip code that the food hub had an active delivery in, it gets highlighted, associated with their food hub, and you can break it down by day of the week. So then you could start to see potential cross-docking opportunities, things like that. Whether it's something that, we find funding for and continue to develop and make mature or not, has yet to be seen, but it's a starting point, and there have been a number of outcomes that came from that, at least jumping off point. So it's been cool to see that as a potential. And I know that Will Gray is working with folks on an asset map that I think would be super interesting to learn about here. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I was mostly going to +1 Katelyn and Jesse, and so I will just add that or just sort of highlight really quickly that two of the sitting at the vantage point that we are, which is the goal is that if we're working on a new technology. And I would use that in the broadest possible sense of that term, whether that be a software platform or policies or any sort of design intervention that we're trying to stretch across everyone. I think the sort of guiding questions are, what's useful from a high level that any of these operators can't see from where they're standing, like that can only be done with this kind of a vantage point. And then where is there enough alignment between affinity between these folks and intention between these folks that and trust between these folks that they will that it will solve a problem for them and encourage them to do something different. And I want to land on that because it was like, that's the part that I feel like is often one of the, I don't know if this is the part where we talk about what's hard, but I'm going to say a thing that I think is hard about technology, which is that anytime I feel like we are telling operators to do something different than what they do, that feels like we are drawing down on our collective trust or the collective value we've built up as a network, as opposed to pouring into it. And so I do think that more than, and maybe this tracks, Katelyn, to your point about the sort of levels that a network goes through as it develops. But I think I felt the most fatigue and maybe right on the edge of frustration with folks when it comes to conversations around not just Jesse's point about data normalization and like all the technical parts, but any approach that says that we're gonna come in and dictate how Ellie Baumstein does Ellie Baumstein's job from an outside perspective. I think we're trying to be very cognizant because there's a huge amount of upside and there's a lot of agreement and intention around wanting something different. The actual getting there has been challenging because I think it needs a really, really high level of trust between a group of people that sometimes do not. Like, a wonderful thing about our network is that we have very, very different kinds of operators in very different places with very different models. And without a clean, either a very clean line on why we're doing this and what it's going to be for, or a smaller group sort of testing something and then bringing it out to the larger group. I think we've tried to be appropriately wary, given that we're a fairly nascent, network of fairly established organizations. And so we're trying not to fall into the trap of just saying that if everyone turns over all of their transactional data all at once, will be great, but that's a big ask for a lot of folks.
And I can maybe like add as an operator, because it's true, right? Like we have designed our own platform because there was like nothing that we felt like would work for us. And since we are not holding inventory and everything needs to be like everything we get has been already pre-sold, that communication with the farmer and the client happening almost at the same time to leave the farmer's market immediately has like nothing was like there that we could use. So going into a conversation with a network of food hubs and thinking what would it take to change your platform or to adopt new operation it could be difficult, especially since we know that we are always like understaffed, or there's like a lot that needs to be done in the day-to-day. Probably that is like the hardest part to reach an agreement on what kind of technology could be used. And then the point is, like, since the needs are different, you would expect that if you're going to adopt a new technology, it has to be as seamless as possible, which we know it's not like that, right? You need to go and learn about it and maybe like change and what would it take in your operations. That is like always a scary thought. So you could be open to collaborate, and I think that is like, Katelyn was saying, like probably the beginning is like when you do these one-to-one transactions, that helps to understand like the need of the other, and probably that's why a further step is like finding these like more like seamless transaction environment. But these one-to-one operations create trust and help to understand what the other partner need. And I think that is like the best way to approach some of those collaborations, right? It's like the moment you see the one on the other and try to find commonalities of what could solve these like common problems, maybe the best path. So for that you need time. For that you need some trust that to be built, but also who is going to fund all the time. We know that, you know, if you are out there to get grants, people need outcomes very quickly, but you know, there's a saying that change happens at the pace of trust, right? And you need to go through that before getting a lot of people working together.
All right, this is such a rich conversation that as a facilitator, I have like 11 questions that I want to ask you all to follow up, because there was so much in what y'all were just saying. And I see there's a bunch of really great questions from the audience, but I'm going to zoom in on what y'all were just talking about really quick, and then we can hop to some of these audience questions, because the word trust has come up a lot, and Hugo just hit on one of my most favorite idioms about change happening at the speed of trust. So I'm wondering if you all could reflect a little bit on the role of trust in a food hub network, how you build it, maybe what happens when it's not there. And yeah, just share a little bit about why that's important. All right, well, I might have whiffed it on my choice of the 9 available questions.
I saw that one. I was trying to like think back through how I first engaged with the network, because I heard about the EFC as it had already formed, and we weren't technically a part of that initial formation group. And I was like, hey, I want to be a part of this, but I think, the same goes for just like starting Fresh List in the beginning, like going out to farms, showing up. Obviously, I could have just been saying the things that the farmers wanted to hear in terms of, I'm going to, invest all my time and energy into trying to make your world better. But it takes a while for people to really see that and understand it. I think, the EFC did a good job of kind of drafting a memorandum of understanding with the initial groups, like this is what we stand for, and kind of defining some of those things early, because South Carolina Food Hub Network did not necessarily have those same, or at least didn't apply the you need to be acting like a food hub in these ways, and it kind of creates some issues where like a grocery, kind of like a quasi grocery store, joins and they aren't selling anything, they're only buying, and then they're trying to make it a price war, and like things can get off track if you aren't really explicit in the beginning about what does the group stand for and what do we want to accomplish. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret to getting trust quickly, but I think just being clear in the beginning, and also like I've had this conversation with, there's also a North Carolina Food Hub Network that I found out about recently that's been around for like 2 or 3 years, and I'm kind of upset that we're not part of it, but it's because we were technically a for-profit whenever we started, not because we felt like we wanted to enter the wild, lucrative world of local food, but kind of using the things that you learn in a corporate environment with how to look at a P&L and make the finances work. We wanted to prove that this model could be done in a way that was financially viable and sustainable. There are a lot of days where we regret not being a nonprofit, because we certainly have access to a lot more funding. But for us, we talked to some of the other hubs. I've had to have that conversation. Like, look, I came from a corporate environment where it is so cutthroat, but this isn't me versus you. It's all of us against the system that we're trying to change. And, I'm here. I will be here tomorrow. I'll be here the day after that. Talk to any of our farmers. We're I don't know, that just being genuine has always served us well. Yeah, Hugo, I don't know if you had anything to add.
I think that also it depends on the complexity of the area. I want to mention, like, if you are based in the DC metro area, you are a nonprofit working in food, probably you're gonna have to get funding from the same 10 funders that are here in the region, and we all have to compete for those fundings, but also try to collaborate. So the environment doesn't necessarily help to immediately go into a collaboration, right? It's very important to think that about that also. I know that in other areas of the country is very different. Maybe there are largest foundations and the levels or investment that could be different, but I'm talking specifically about a region like our region. So really going into a collaboration needs a lot of trust, because also the resources are very limited and you have to show impact to your funders. And we normally go into a collaboration after we have gotten the money individually, and then you feel a little more like you could take a risk. And see, if you are comfortable or you have discovered the secret sauce to convince your funders, it could be difficult just to be open to change. And I overcoming that takes time, and it's also difficult to build trust in that way, right? You need to make sure that when you're working with somebody, you're really looking for each other's goals and benefits. So I've seen that, been working in the region for 8 years now, and I've seen that happening since the very beginning. When we started, the model that we had was because this area was so filled with talent organizations that have been here for a very long time, and for us was a question was why would anybody give money to us if we have these organizations being here? So how we could find the niche, how we could be different, what can we do that other organizations are not doing? And because that was the goal. So now that we've been more established, we are looking also for partnerships. We have the capacity to add that kind of to expand our goals. But originally, we have been very hard for us to find a collaboration that's how that is going to affect my grant, my funding. And I don't know if funders or even the networks are able to assess that when somebody is coming to tell you, what, we should collaborate. That is an important step before going into any partnership. And almost it depends on you, right? It's there's an opportunity joining the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative for us, but you need to know, it's okay, going there, would that help us to expand? Would that help us to be better? Or we're just going into a competitive environment? So that would be a question to assess that. What do you think, Will?
Got a plan, Will?
No, once again, I'm mostly just going to plus one y'all, 100%. I think the thing I try to from the network level, the thing that I try to check in with myself on is to just acknowledge that if the goal is to facilitate trade between these folks and to do it in a way that is open and transparent and collaborative, then I'm asking them to take an extremely risky position. Yeah. And there is a great deal of institutionalized knowledge about produce distribution that would say that they should not do it, that it is directly against many of the sort of lessons of traditional how business is done in this country and in this space in particular. And it's funny to be in a conversation with in this value chain. I often feel like I'm on the other side of this and trying to advocate for why trust needs to be a part of the conversation. I know this is a very trusting space, but I think it's still important to acknowledge that that's not what it's like most of the time. And so it shouldn't be unusual that folks aren't ready to turn over their books. It is an earned thing, and it's something that I think we try to be really, really cautious about in recognizing what we are asking people to expose themselves to. And as we try to bring in resources or practices, I think that's what we can do to help. And I say we, I mean as a network, what we can do to help to help manage that risk for them a little bit and make sure that the trust is going to get built over time, these one-off transactions, all of these, but that if we're asking them to take a big leap, we got to at least be a little bit responsible for where they come down on that leap. Otherwise, we're not really being good actors.
Awesome. And I'll just quickly say, yeah, definitely a +1 to Will. Definitely the importance of, I think as a Food Hub network coordinator, it's very easy to kind of be a bull in a china shop, just being a doer, goer. You want to see results, and you see a vision that is possible. But I think it's been important to slow down and really put on a Food Hub manager hat, like Will was referring to, making sure that as network coordinators, we're really appreciating how vulnerable these food hubs are choosing to be with their data when they share with each other and when they share a table and they decide to show up in this way, that again is like very not business as usual, like Will was saying. And to also celebrate like the baby steps along the way, to build that trust. We went through also an MOU process. We actually used Eastern Food Hub Collaborative's MOU as our jumping off point. So that was an awesome way of network to network collaboration. A few things that the New Hampshire Food Hub Network in particular, we decided to change around or spend more time discussing, fleshing out a little bit more. So we went through pretty much a 4-month process, facilitated process, all on Zoom, to flesh that out and get a document that everyone felt really solid to sign on the dotted line. We all came in person last year in May to kind of sign, go through a little formal celebration, to be in person and to build that trust and to use it as an opportunity to celebrate. So yeah.
There's so much there. I was like scribbling notes, listening to you all reflect. And I think, Katelyn, you were talking about the phased approach that I think Cullen shared with you. And that feels like sort of part of this trust building too, is those earlier things of like, oh, hey, here's how we did this, or here's a copy of our MOU, maybe feel a little less risky and don't start to feel like a threat to those businesses that are so used to operating in this, competition mindset that's like so ingrained in the way that business works and particularly food business works. So I like the idea of using that phased approach maybe to build that trust up over time. And then also the MOU I think is really smart because it's really helpful to have something down on paper that says, these are our values, these are our expectations, this is the way that we're going to behave. So it does feel like there's a couple tools that are really key. So yeah, thank you all for sharing that. Obviously this call could go on for way longer than we have scheduled for it, but we only have a few minutes left. And I know there's a ton of great questions in the chat that we're not going to get to. So apologies again, just lifting up that value chain coordination discussion group, but there is one from Elliot that got a couple, upvotes here. So I'm going to go to that and then we're going to close this out. So Elliot just was wondering if you could magically go back and redo one thing from your previous network development, what would you do differently and why? And I think Katelyn and Will maybe will kick us off, but also would love to hear from the hubs about what you would have liked to see maybe from the networks you're a part of. Lessons, anything you would have changed? You did it perfectly. Oh my God.
I kind of alluded to the thing that I saw that the EFC got right, that maybe the South Carolina Food Hub Network didn't initially get right. I think they recognized, it's a growing and evolving thing over time. But just being very clear in the beginning about what those expectations are and kind of what the rules are, because we do exist in a little bit of a different world. I remember as a kid, mom would buy me some clothes from, Walmart for an event that I had because we were fancy, and we'd hang on to the receipt because afterwards she wanted to be able to return it. If you sell, and I've done this, we sell asparagus to 4P and it wasn't packed the way that they expected it, or something happens and it goes bad or they lose some of it, they're not going to just return it and it's all on me to figure out, because we both know there are farmers at the heart of that. And so you work together and try and figure out how to make it to where no one has to absorb all of a loss, and that's that goes back to the collaborative component of all of this. It's like we're in this together, and yeah, let's fix the problems when they're problems, but also it's not a winner take all. So
Well, I'll say, trust me, I wasn't going back that everything has gone perfectly. I was going back to what's the one thing. We were lucky enough to get, as we first started sort of exploring doing programming as a network and not just sort of uplifting the programs of individual members. We got regional food partnerships program support. We are so grateful for it, and if there are any of our colleagues from USDA, I cannot underscore enough how grateful we are for that opportunity. And also, I would do it with unrestricted funding, because the trying to match the dynamic human-centered work in an environment that's constantly changing to USDA timelines and funding buckets has been a challenge, particularly with an eye towards trying to find spaces to build trust and not feel like we are taxing that trust. To reiterate, extremely grateful for the funding. Look forward to a long and powerful relationship with them.
Yeah.
That was extremely tactful. Good job, Will.
Yeah.
Any other lessons learned before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, quickly I'll say an ongoing thing in New Hampshire that I didn't really get to in earlier is, and I think all food hub networks probably deal with this, is just how dynamic our food hubs are. We have distribution-based food hubs and your typical warehouse trucking based food hubs, but we also have like 100% retail store-based food hubs, because it very much falls within the USDA definition, because the definition is kind of endlessly accepting of food businesses. And I think for me, one ongoing challenge for me is, how do I provide value equally to food hubs that are so different in business structure, in funding, in the types of farms that they work with, the scale, everything. So I think really maybe dialing in from the beginning, like who is at the table, who is this food hub network for, really, like who are the primary beneficiaries, and or if we are like an all-encompassing food hub network, how do I provide value best to all different kinds of food hubs and not just distribution based, because I think food hub networks tend to favor those that have trucks on the road, for better or for worse. So.
All right. I hate to cut this off because I feel like there's just endless topics we could talk about. Andrew did mention the discussion group, and I'm going to hand it back to him to wrap us up. Thank you all so much. I learned a ton. I feel like we really got into the nitty gritty, but also there's an endless number of topics, which is what this call is for. And I think, you've given us a lot to think about, to discuss in March. So thank you again. I really appreciate your expertise. And I'm going to hand it to Andrew to land the plane. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ellie. Yeah, thanks you all
Thank
for
you.
sharing. And just, I would reiterate that discussion group, especially for something like which technology do you use, and there's a link to different options. You can export in there and share what's working or not in there. So a couple of things coming up. Wanted to also bring your attention to, we've got a policy series coming up, gearing up for the Farm Bill, and I just put the registration in the chat. That's a 3-part series that starts tomorrow and is with a communications firm that we've worked with quite a bit over the past year, and just has great templates and things for storytelling and getting your message out there in a very convincing way. So we'll start tomorrow, I think, with storytelling and kind of a 101, and then build on that throughout the series. So join that if you're be working in policy. Also, the LAMP grant RFPs are live, including, I'll put the link for that in here, including, value-added producer grants might be something a network could approach. Also, the regional food system partnerships, definitely in line with Food Hub networks as well. So if you're not, take a look at those. And we're also looking for topics for upcoming calls. Like if technology, that conversation can't happen online, let us know. If you want to do it as a group, we could do a live thing on that, or any other topic that came up today you feel like there's more energy on. Happy to keep it going. And we'll share these links out by email after the call. But thanks again to the panelists for sharing, everyone else for coming and sharing your thoughts and your questions.
Thanks, everybody. See you in March.